The words hung in the air, sharp and definite, a verdict delivered before any trial. I didn't react when my boss blamed me for the project's failure. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the unspoken expectation that I would crumble, apologize, or fight back. My colleagues shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between my boss's accusatory stare and my own stillness. There was no surge of anger, no desperate need for defense, no instinct to argue. My heart rate was steady, my breathing even. This wasn't surrender. It was strategy. It wasn't because I was weak, or because the accusation was true. It was because in that moment, I understood something fundamental about navigating professional conflict. Something most people miss in the heat of the moment. When someone is lying confidently, especially someone in a position of power, the worst thing you can possibly do is interrupt them. You must let them speak. Let them build their narrative, brick by fragile brick. Because a story built on falsehoods has a weak foundation. Given enough room, it will collapse under its own weight. My silence wasn't empty, it was an invitation for my boss to keep talking, to elaborate, to add details, and, ultimately, to create the very inconsistencies that would later dismantle his own argument. This wasn't just any project, it was a high-stakes initiative, the kind that gets executive attention and promises to redefine a market segment. The pressure had been immense from day one. The deadlines were aggressive, the budget was tight, and the stakeholders were demanding. My team and I had worked tirelessly, navigating shifting requirements and unforeseen technical hurdles. We had communicated every risk, documented every decision, and flagged every potential delay in writing. I had seen the narrative starting to shift weeks earlier. Vague, verbal approvals from my boss were later reframed as suggestions. Key decisions he'd made in one-on-one conversations were conveniently forgotten in larger group meetings. It was subtle at first, a quiet rewriting of history that I started to meticulously document, not with suspicion, but with discipline. Every verbal agreement was followed by a polite confirmation email. Every change in scope was logged in our project management tool, with a clear record of the requester. So as I sat there, absorbing the blame, I wasn't feeling defeated. I was observing, I was listening, and I was remembering the clear, unassailable trail of facts I had quietly assembled. The truth doesn't need a loud defense, it just needs a platform. And my boss, in his confident monologue, was unknowingly building that platform for me. My response would come, but not now. It would come later, not as an emotional outburst, but as a calm, structured presentation of reality. A reality supported by dates, emails, and his own words. This is the art of letting the truth speak for itself. It started, as these things often do, with a project delay. Not just any project, but the flagship initiative of the quarter. The one with high visibility, aggressive timelines, and the kind of pressure that makes or breaks careers. We were building a new client-facing platform, and I was leading the technical integration. The work was complex, involving multiple teams, legacy systems, and a hard launch date that was set in stone by leadership months before my team was even assembled. For weeks, we navigated the challenges. We flagged risks early, documenting every dependency and every potential bottleneck. I sent weekly status reports, clear and concise, outlining our progress and, more importantly, the external blockers that were beginning to stack up. A critical API from another department wasn't ready. A key vendor was late on their deliverables. These weren't excuses, they were facts, logged in our project management tool, and discussed in our stand-up meetings. I made sure every stakeholder was aware of the shifting ground beneath our feet. I believed transparency was our best defense. I was wrong. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A deadline was missed, a milestone, not the final launch, but an important one. And suddenly, the narrative began to change. The open communication channels I had relied on grew quiet. I started hearing whispers of closed-door meetings, syncs I wasn't invited to. My name was being mentioned, not in the context of finding a solution, but in the context of assigning blame. The collaborative energy that had defined the project soured into something else, something colder. It was the unnerving feeling of being on the outside of a story that was being written about you. Then came the public accusation. It wasn't an email or a quiet chat, it was a performance. My boss called an emergency all hands with the entire division. The air in the conference room was thick with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I took my usual seat, assuming we were there to collectively strategize a path forward, to rally the troops and solve the problem, as a team. Share this with someone who's being quietly blamed right now. He stood at the front of the room, his expression a carefully crafted mask of grave concern. He spoke about accountability, he spoke about the importance of ownership, and then, without any warning, he turned his focus to the integration workstream. He didn't mention the vendor delays, or the internal dependencies we had been flagging for over a month. He didn't talk about the extra hours my team had put in to mitigate those very issues. He simply looked out at the assembled faces and said the failure was mine. The words hung in the air, sharp and absolute. There was no private conversation beforehand. No questions about my perspective, no request for the data I had meticulously compiled, just a statement, a verdict delivered in a public forum, designed for maximum impact. It was a calculated move, a corporate execution. In that moment, the project, the deadline, the technical details, they all faded into the background. The only thing that mattered was the narrative he was creating. I remember the silence that followed his declaration. It felt louder than the accusation itself. I looked around the room, my mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. I saw a few colleagues quickly look down at their notebooks, avoiding my gaze. I saw others exchange brief, knowing glances. And in their reactions, I saw the truth. This wasn't about finding a solution or learning from a setback. This was about survival. My boss, the leader who had preached a gospel of psychological safety and radical candor, was now demonstrating the oldest rule in the corporate playbook. He wasn't trying to fix a problem. He was trying to protect himself. He needed a scapegoat to shield his own leadership from scrutiny, and he had just nominated me for the role in front of everyone. The betrayal wasn't just that he blamed me. It was that he did it so strategically, turning my own team and colleagues into an audience for my professional demise. In that cold, quiet conference room, I realized the problem wasn't the project delay anymore. The problem was my boss, and I knew I couldn't let his version of the story be the only one. In any large organization, there's a formal structure, an org chart that tells you who reports to whom, but beneath that, there's a second, invisible structure, built on influence, history, and perception. It's the architecture of power, and I was about to get a masterclass in its design. He had authority, yes, but it was more than just a title on a door. It was the kind of power that comes from years of navigating the same hallways, of knowing where all the institutional bodies are buried. He had tenure, which gave him a deep network of allies and a long memory of past battles won, and he had a reputation, carefully cultivated, as a decisive leader who delivered. His word carried immense weight, not just in our department but across the entire floor. When he spoke, people listened, and they rarely questioned. This wasn't just a boss, this was an institution. And me? I had a role, clearly defined but ultimately subordinate. I had a paycheck, a tangible reminder of my dependency on this ecosystem and the people who ran it. My position felt precarious, my contributions valuable, but not indispensable. In the grand scheme of the organization, I was a replaceable part. But in the quiet of my own mind, I realized I had something else, something he might have overlooked. I had a choice. This was the critical junction. I could react emotionally. I could let the anger, the frustration, and the sense of injustice take over. That path was easy, a straight line fueled by adrenaline. It would have felt good for a moment, but it would have been a short-lived victory, leading to a swift and predictable end. Or I could respond strategically. I could treat this not as a personal attack, but as a complex problem to be solved. This path was harder, requiring patience, discipline, and a level of emotional control I wasn't sure I possessed. I chose the second. From that day on, I changed nothing outwardly, but everything internally. My demeanor remained professional, my work ethic consistent. I was still the reliable team member, but my focus shifted. Every action became deliberate. Every email was a potential document. Every meeting was an opportunity to establish a factual record. My internal operating system had been rewritten. The goal was no longer just to do the work, but to document the work being done, creating an unassailable fortress of facts. My quiet internal transformation had begun. I documented everything, every email, every approval, every meeting note. When instructions changed, I asked for confirmation in writing. Share this with someone who's being quietly blamed right now.